I hope I didn't scare you there. Nah, I'm just kidding. I hope I did scare you. Otherwise I wouldn't have done that bit. Speaking of scariness, what do you guys think of horror games? The genre of horror games is one that I've been a big fan of for the last 7 years or so, and that wasn't always the case. I mean, why would you want to play a game that is designed to make you terrified? Jesus Christ! You could be playing a nice, relaxing game that makes you feel comfy and cozy, and yet here you are simulating your life being at constant risk from rancid, screeching beasts. Oh, hello! Hey, buddy! How's it going? How's it going, man? Oh, shoot, he's there! This was my viewpoint on the genre for a good while when I was younger, not just for video games, but for other media as well. Read a few Goosebumps books in elementary school, saw stuff like Coraline and the Dark Crystal, which, to be fair, still have some elements that creep me out, and I decided that horror was not my thing at all. That was until a certain game popped up in 2017 that piqued the interest of 16-year-old me. A little nightmare of a game called Little Nightmares.
Please clap.
At that point, my curiosity in the genre I rejected as a child started to crawl back into my head, and I figured that this short, unique-looking experience that had a ton of praise online would be a great Kickstarter to satiate this intrigue, and satiate it did. So many things about this game made me realize the beauty in horror as a genre, from the stories that could only fit in a scary atmosphere, to the creative designs pulled from uniquely twisted minds, to the tense rush of a dreadful chase, simulating our prehistoric instinct of survival or some deep crap like that, I don't know. Is Little Nightmares the scariest game ever? No, but it is the one that made me care for horror media at large. Just look at one of my most recent live-streamed playthroughs, the Dead Space one. I would not have had the courage to ever try amazing games like that had it not been for Little Nightmares. You're gonna get me! You're gonna get me! Oh no! So as a thank you to the game, let me talk about why it's a certified gamer classic. Also, just so you know, there will be spoilers since it is a short game, and a lot of the points I'll be using can ruin the surprising stuff, so if you don't care for some spoilers, keep watching. Otherwise, go play it, and then come back. Or don't. You could always just leave. Alright, let's go. One of the things that first got me interested in Little Nightmares was the art style. Something about the contorted, exaggerated nature of the structures and people, if you can even call them that anymore, make this game stand out visually amongst the many different styles that feature throughout other horror titles. It also helps that the main character you control is such a strong visual contrast with the world around her. Six, or as my friend Eth Bona calls her, Georgie, is a child in a yellow raincoat, and by far the most normal looking thing in the game. Sure, she's got a comically large and polygonal hood on her coat, and you can barely make out a face buried in there half the time. But compared to stuff like little beige gnomes that scurry around or a blind janitor with pool noodles for arms, she's the closest link to reality you've got for most of the game. That aforementioned bright raincoat aids a lot in setting you apart from the background and giving you a clear indicator of your place in the world. Most of the environments are very dim, lit only by a few old light bulbs or a hazy blue atmosphere, and if they aren't dim, they're dark. There's many points where it's just you, your trusty lighter, and the sight of Six alone with her primary colored coat. That's another thing I like about this style as well, the third-person perspective and various camera angles. The team over at Tarsier Studios did a great job to make the environment feel like a theater stage, or as they put it,
we lock the camera in what we think of as a dollhouse perspective,
with the infamous fourth wall taken away completely. The levels are like those cross-section books you read as a kid where an ocean liner or the Millennium Falcon was cut into pieces to show the inner workings of what was going on. Despite the presentation, you don't move on a 2D plane like you would in games such as Terraria, or a similar game, Limbo. It has a three-dimensional space to run around in, and I think the depth it has is pretty neat. The areas you traverse keep this in mind, providing ample hiding opportunities from the beastly residents, yet also screwing you over when the exit you desperately need isn't in a straight line. In summary, the artists of this game were very proud of what they were doing and banked on it as much as they could, and to
great success.
I feel like it's just tradition at this point to have music listed as a discussion point in these certified classic videos. Sound design in general is a really memorable thing that you take away from playing games, and music is the epitome of sounds you'll have a hard time forgetting. The soundtrack of Little Nightmares, as iconic to many as it seems, is interesting in that it doesn't really play that often. Most of the time spent in this game is dedicated to keeping you on the edge of your seat with suspiciously quiet environments. Music playing at all times could potentially ease some of that tension building inside of you. Just look at the difference between this little part here as it plays normally versus when I add some background music. When music does play in this game, it is almost always at a scare that catches you by surprise, or at a pivotal story moment, or as the theme of an enemy whose lair you've stumbled into. Ooh, you winding up a monkey? I can do that too. See? You can't get away with this monkey business. Despite its sparse nature, Tobias Lilya's soundtrack for this game is just so damn good. It's eerie and shrill when it needs to be, it's inquisitive and mysterious when it needs to be, and it's bittersweet and somber when it needs to be. Many of these haunting tracks use small choirs, music boxes, and children's xylophones, capitalizing on the fact that the place you are currently trapped in both figuratively and literally represents a place of kids' nightmares. Some of the music doesn't even feel like it's just you hearing it, that being you, the player. Diegetic chants of the hungry guests later in the game are evidently a real occurrence taking place in this freakish world, growing louder in volume and intensity the closer 6 gets to their gruesome dining hall. I think music plays an immense role in keeping a game stuck in one's mind for weeks, months, or even in my case, years after playing it. And I can safely say that the tunes this game put out definitely aren't leaving my brain anytime soon. Atmospherically, I think the game is already pretty good, but it's the meshing of the style with the gameplay that really elevates the experience for me. A lot of Little Nightmares' gameplay is subdued, with traditional horror game elements such as inventory and health management put to the side for a smaller range of mechanics. 6 can jump, sneak, run, look around, and aside from her lighter, she doesn't keep any items, only able to pick up, use, and throw single objects. As simple and limiting as all of these mechanics are, that's kind of the point. They feed into the game's horror and the loop of trying to survive this setting perfectly. This small set of skills is all you need to get through the game, and makes it far more intimidating due to your lack of power over these issues. There's no health bar because you are a fragile little child.
I'm just too good.
Anything and everything can kill you in this grim area, and if you aren't careful, you'll be dead before you even know what hit you. As a side note to these mechanics, I also just have to compliment the devs on making them feel so real. There's things that happen with some of 6's movements that they didn't have to animate or fit into the game, but I'm glad they did, just to let the audience suspend their disbelief even more with the world. An example would be how 6 runs out of breath when she sprints for a really long time, and flails her arms in exhaustion as she slows, or how, if you twirl her in a little circle, she can dizzily trip over herself and fall on the ground. All these mechanics and more are applied into your escape from the industrial hellhole you find yourself in, solving puzzles, doing some light parkour, uncovering secret discoveries, and most importantly of all, guiding yourself through stealth sections. The stealth sections of this game are indeed the highlight for me because they just have such a great build-up, presence, and payoff to them. All the monsters are just so memorable in how disturbing they are, and as distorted as they may appear, they just kinda go about their daily tasks and chores working on this vessel. That is, unless they see you, deciding their jobs can wait, and that they need to throttle this child that's messing with their workstations. Oh, hi.
This guy moaned at least this loud.
I think among my encounters with the monsters of Little Nightmares, the janitor has to be my favorite. He's just so gross and wretched in how he moves, cracking his neck and clenching his teeth, and he can reach practically anywhere with his spaghetti arms and spindly fingers. In your best interest, however, he's blind and relies completely on sound and touch to feel out his surroundings, meaning that you have to do your darndest to be as silent as possible when navigating his lair. Let me just show you how great this encounter with him is. You hear strange noises upon entering this room, and to investigate the sound, you start sneaking towards it, like you've been training yourself to do up to this point. There stands the janitor, wrapping the bodies of kids up in cloth for some purpose. You try to crawl past him, but he hears you and snatches you up. It might take a bit to realize, but walking on cloth is the ideal play, since it doesn't creak when you step on it. And after a close call or two, you crawl into this room which features a lever you need to insert and wind. This is all fine and dandy until you realize that it's really loud, and the janitor knows something is off. As you saw, this short section exemplifies a ton of the spooky gameplay Little Nightmares has to offer. You cautiously navigate around things that can or want to kill you, yet are thrust every now and then into a situation where you have no choice but to actively endanger yourself to continue onwards. If I had a major complaint about the gameplay, however, it'd be that there's really not any replay value once you play through this game the first time. It's very linear, and while some aspects aren't fully repeated, such as where the enemies go or what mistakes you make, it's never going to be quite as scary as your first go at it. For such is the nature of horror games. Playing as this little kid, this 9-year-old kid named Six. Shoe jump scare. And she's trying to... Out of all the certified classic videos I've made thus far, this one's definitely got the heaviest emphasis on story out of all of them, which is quite ironic given that there's not much explained about this world at all. Even the game's expansions and lore released after this title barely explain anything about what's going on. They hint at a few things and answer a small handful of questions, yet simultaneously leave much more to ponder on, and I absolutely love this decision. Mystery and hidden details are incredibly satisfying elements of horror, as they keep you guessing on what kinds of events transpired for such strange things to happen in the first place. I really don't want to bring up the whole fear of the unknown thing that literally every other YouTuber has brought up when talking about horror games, but that aspect really does apply to Little Nightmares in the story of its universe. What you don't know is much more terrifying of a conclusion to what you do know. Despite the lack of an evident story, you can kind of piece together some of the stuff going on and figure it out in your own interpretation. In my opinion, I think the developers know the exact explanations for what's going on in Little Nightmares, but just don't want to spoil the fun for us to try and keep us solving the mystery. The main story is about Six's objective to escape the giant watercraft known as the Maw. Most of what's known about it is that it stays in the ocean all year, but surfaces once annually, never in the same spot. On board there's a prison a janitor keeps close watch over, a kitchen that twin chefs use to practice their artisanal skills, and a dining hall that new guests go to gorge themselves in. Above it all, a woman in long robes watches through her white porcelain mask. That's about all the objective facts I could give you about Little Nightmares, because in a game that's entirely visual, with no dialogue whatsoever, unless you count this, any guess is fair game. Why are children kept imprisoned in the lower parts of the Maw, and why are they so normal when compared to the adults of this world? Speaking of, why are the adults so creepy and warped in this setting? Did some event change them into this? It's really up to you to understand the lore of Little Nightmares, and I truly believe that is part of what makes it such a special game. What more is there to say about Little Nightmares? Well, a lot more for me to say, actually, but I don't want to make this a super long video. I think that Little Nightmares is a beautifully crafted horror game that has a ton of heart and soul put into the experience, as dark of an experience as it may be. I think it's a great game to give a shot, especially if you're on the fence about getting into the horror genre, just as I was. Though this game might not be as terrifying when compared to some of the other stuff that I've played since, I'll always keep it in mind as the one that eased me into the genre and got me to appreciate multiple works of art I would have otherwise avoided due to them being scary.
Close the door.
Where's it?
Get over there.
Oh yeah, and the DLC and sequel to this game are fantastic as well, and keep the tone consistent while adding new settings, story, and characters, though both will probably make you really sad for a while after beating them. I just really hope to God that the third game will be amazing despite getting a new studio to work on the franchise. It looks very promising and really fun since it's co-op, but please, just don't mess it up, Supermassive Games. Anyways, I'm getting off track. Give Little Nightmares a play.
This is a certified gamer classic.